The Smile Protocols. First Contact Protocols. The Galactic Council chamber hung in the void like a jewel of impossible geometry, its crystalline walls refracting the light of 1,000 distant stars. Ambassador Zixthar of the Velkari Concordat adjusted his 7 sensory stalks as he floated before the assembled representatives of 43 civilized species. His bioluminescent skin pulsed with the formal patterns of diplomatic address, though inside, his 3 hearts beat with barely concealed anxiety. "Honored Council," he began, his voice translated simultaneously into 42 languages through quantum entanglement. "I come before you to discuss the classification of the newly discovered species from Sector 7 Prime. Planetary designation: Earth." A ripple of disinterest passed through the chamber. New species were discovered every few cycles. Most of them primitive, some hostile, none particularly remarkable. The Council had been managing galactic affairs for over 2 million standard years. They had seen everything. Council Speaker Mordanthus, a being of living stone from the ancient Petra Dominion, gestured with one massive arm. "Proceed with your report, Ambassador. What classification have the xenobiologists assigned?" Zixthar hesitated, his skin flickering orange, the Velkari equivalent of a grimace. "Class 7, Honored Speaker. Non-threatening. Limited technological development. Recommended for standard contact protocols and potential trade partnership." A series of clicks and whistles erupted from the Chitauri delegation. Laughter. Class 7 species were barely worth the Council's attention. They were the cosmic equivalent of children playing with rocks. But Zixthar had read the full report. He had studied the biological scans, the atmospheric analyses, the gravitational measurements. Something about the data made his primary nerve cluster tingle with unease. "However," he continued, his voice carrying more urgency than diplomatic protocol typically allowed, "I must note several anomalies in the assessment. The humans, as they call themselves, evolved on a planet with gravitational force 1.4 times galactic standard. Their atmospheric oxygen content is 21%, toxic to most Council species. Their star emits dangerous radiation, and yet they not only survive but thrive under these conditions." Mordanthus rumbled, a sound like continental plates grinding. "Many species evolve in harsh conditions, Ambassador. This does not elevate their classification. There is more, Honored Speaker. Their history files show an unprecedented level of intraspecies conflict. In the past 5,000 local years, they have fought over 14,000 recorded wars. Their technological advancement has been driven primarily by the need to destroy each other more efficiently." This drew more attention. The Felgoran military advisor, General Crix, leaned forward on his 6 legs. "A warrior species? Perhaps we should reassess." "They are not warriors in the traditional sense," Zixthar interrupted, immediately regretting the breach of protocol. "They are something else. Their biology shows evidence of pursuit predator ancestry. They evolved to chase their prey to exhaustion over impossible distances. They have greater endurance than any species currently on the Council registry, and their psychological profile suggests they bond intensely with other species, including potential food sources, which they then domesticate rather than hunt." "Fascinating anthropology," Mordanthus said, his tone suggesting it was anything but. "But Class 7 remains appropriate until they demonstrate otherwise. You are cleared for standard first contact. Submit your mission report within 30 cycles." Zixthar wanted to protest further, but the Council had spoken. He departed the chamber with the weight of prophecy pressing against his consciousness. A Velkari ability that had served his species well throughout the ages. Something was wrong about this classification. Something fundamental. 3 weeks later, Zixthar's ship entered Earth's atmosphere, accompanied by 2 diplomatic cruisers and a full honor guard. The humans had been transmitting radio signals for over 200 years, so they were aware, theoretically, that they were not alone in the universe. But knowing intellectually and seeing with one's own eyes were vastly different things. The landing site had been designated by mutual agreement, a place called Geneva, in a political structure called Switzerland. The humans had assured him it was neutral ground, whatever that meant. As if ground could have political allegiances. When his ship's doors opened, Zixthar's sensory stalks were immediately assaulted by the alien environment. The gravity crushed down on him with oppressive force. His environmental suit's compensators whined with effort. The air, even filtered, tasted of 1,000 industrial chemicals and organic compounds. This world was harsh, violent in its very essence. But the humans themselves appeared small, fragile even. A delegation waited at the base of his ship's ramp. They wore simple coverings, clothing, his cultural database informed him, in dark colors. They stood upright on two legs, which seemed precarious at best. Their skin was pale, soft-looking, completely devoid of natural armor or protective scales. Their faces held two forward-facing eyes, predator eyes, his mind noted with a chill, and various other features that his xenobiology training helped him identify. The lead human stepped forward. "Ambassador Zixthar," it said through a translation device, though Zixthar's own technology provided a clearer version. "I am Secretary General Martinez of the United Nations. On behalf of humanity, welcome to Earth." Zixthar began his prepared greeting, reciting the formal words of first contact that had been refined over millennia. But he noticed something that made his words falter. A human child had broken through the security cordon. It couldn't have been more than half a meter tall, with large eyes and an oversized head, characteristics that usually indicated either disease or immaturity. The guards were moving toward it, but slowly, carefully, as if afraid to harm it. The child ran up to Zixthar with the fearless curiosity of youth and looked up at him with those predator eyes, and then it smiled. The expression involved baring teeth, white flat teeth designed for grinding but with prominent canines that spoke of a carnivorous past. The facial muscles pulled back in what Zixthar's analytical mind recognized as a threat display, but simultaneously his cultural database insisted this was a gesture of friendliness, of joy. Every survival instinct Zixthar had developed over 40 years of life screamed at him to run. His environmental suit's biometric sensors went wild. His heart's hammered. His skin flashed through every color of the fear spectrum. His guards raised weapons instinctively, responding to his physiological distress. The human guards also raised weapons, their movements liquid fast despite the crushing gravity. For 3 eternal seconds, first contact teetered on the edge of becoming a massacre. Then Secretary General Martinez laughed, another sound that Zixthar's hindbrain interpreted as a threat, and gently guided the child away. "I apologize, Ambassador. Children are curious. She meant no harm." Zixthar forced his physiology under control, grateful that humans couldn't read Velkari biopatterns. "No harm done," he managed, completing the formal greeting on automatic while his mind raced. Why had he reacted so viscerally? The child was harmless objectively, too small to pose any threat, and yet every fiber of his being had recognized something dangerous in that smile, in those eyes. In the casual way the young human had approached a being that must have seemed utterly alien to it. The ceremony continued. Speeches were made, cultural exchanges were formalized, but Zixthar couldn't shake the feeling that the council had made a terrible mistake. That night, in his assigned quarters in what the humans called a hotel, Zixthar accessed Earth's information networks. The humans had given him broad access, perhaps foolishly trusting or perhaps confident they had nothing to hide. He started with their history files. The wars were well documented. But it wasn't the frequency that disturbed him. Violent species were common enough. It was the persistence. Humans had fought wars lasting decades. Generations had been born and died knowing nothing but conflict. And through it all they had continued to advance, to adapt, to improve. He found records of something called the 100 Years' War, then the 80 Years' War, then 2 world wars that had involved every major civilization on the planet. But it was the smaller stories that truly disturbed him. He read about sieges lasting years, about soldiers who had survived in impossible conditions, about explorers who had crossed entire continents on foot, about humans who had climbed mountains that should have killed them, descended into oceans that should have crushed them, and ventured into frozen wastelands that should have swallowed them forever. He found a phrase that kept recurring: never give up. He discovered their literature, stories that celebrated persistence against impossible odds. Characters who refused to surrender even when defeat was certain. Heroes defined not by their strength but by their refusal to stop. And he found their sports. Competitions where humans ran distances that would kill most species. Events where they fought each other in ritualized combat until exhaustion. Games where the goal was simply to outlast the opponent. One passage from an ancient human text made his sensory stalks curl in primal fear. We are the hunters who never stopped hunting. We are the species that chased our prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We are persistence made flesh. As dawn broke over Geneva, painting the sky in colors that hurt his evolved for different wavelengths eyes, Zixthar made a decision. He would compile a supplementary report, one that the council would need to review. The classification was wrong. Catastrophically wrong. Humans weren't Class 7. They might not be classifiable at all. He remembered the child's smile, and now, with context, he understood his instinctive reaction. It wasn't just a smile. It was the expression of a species that had smiled at predators, at natural disasters, at death itself, and said, "Not today." It was the smile of something that never, ever stopped. 3 days later, as his ship departed Earth with signed treaties and trade agreements, Zixthar transmitted his report to the Galactic Council. He marked it Priority Level Maximum and added a personal note to Speaker Mordanthus. "We have made a grave error. Recommend immediate reclassification and careful diplomatic approach. These beings are dangerous in ways our assessment protocols cannot measure. They do not defeat you with strength, they simply never stop trying. And when they smile..." He paused, his translator struggling to convey the emotion he felt. "When they smile, they have already decided they will win. No matter how long it takes, the message would take 6 weeks to reach Council space. By then, he hoped it wouldn't be too late." Behind him, Earth receded into the cosmic night, a small blue marble in an unremarkable star system, home to creatures that had looked at the universe and decided to make it theirs, one impossible step at a time. The Council was about to learn what every predator on Earth had learned over millions of years. When a human smiles, you should have started running yesterday. The Zarkon miscalculation 6 months had passed since first contact, and the Galactic Council Station Omega-7 buzzed with unprecedented activity. The addition of humanity to the Council had been remarkably smooth. Too smooth, some of the elder species muttered. The humans had adapted to galactic politics with unsettling ease, their diplomats navigating millennia-old protocols as if they'd been born to it. Commander Threx of the Zarkon Imperial Fleet watched the human delegation arrive through the viewing port of his war cruiser, docked at the station's military wing. His reptilian features twisted into what his species considered a sneer. The Zarkon Empire had ruled through strength for 10,000 years, crushing lesser species beneath their boots, expanding their territory through calculated aggression that the Council tolerated because the alternative, war with the Zarkon, was more costly than the occasional annexed world. "Look at them," Threx hissed to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Skarn, walking on 2 legs like newly hatched younglings. No natural weapons, no armor plating, no combat enhancements, and the Council treats them as equals? Skarn, younger and more cautious, shifted uncomfortably. "The reports from Ambassador Zixthar suggested cowardice," Threx interrupted. "The Velkari are prey species frightened of their own shadows. They see threats where none exist." He tapped his claws against the viewport, each talon capable of puncturing standard hull plating. "I will show the Council what these humans truly are. Weak, soft, unworthy." The human delegation consisted of 7 individuals led by Ambassador Sarah Chen, a female of the species with dark hair and features that spoke of East Asian descent, according to Threx's database. She wore a simple blue suit, no armor, no visible weapons. She smiled and shook hands, actually touched flesh to flesh, with various council members, including prey species that the Zarkon would have conquered without a second thought. That smile. Threx had read Zixthar's report and dismissed it as hysteria. A smile was just a facial expression, nothing more. Over the next week, Threx made his contempt clear. When Ambassador Chen addressed the Council, he interrupted with aggressive questions. When she walked the station's corridors, he made sure his soldiers blocked her path, forcing her to go around. When Earth's first trade shipment arrived, he had his fleet perform military exercises dangerously close to the human vessels. Through it all, Sarah Chen smiled. It wasn't the warm, friendly smile she used with other diplomats. This smile was different, thinner, colder, never quite reaching her eyes. Threx interpreted it as fear, as a prey animal baring its teeth in a futile display before the inevitable. He was about to learn how catastrophically wrong he was the incident began on the 15th day of what the humans called negotiations regarding trade routes through Zarkon-controlled space. Thrax had been squeezing, demanding more and more concessions, expecting the humans to eventually capitulate or withdraw. Instead, Ambassador Chen had agreed to every demand with that same cold smile, never arguing, never protesting. It made Threx's warrior instincts itch with unease, but he pushed the feeling aside. Perhaps humans were simply cowards, willing to surrender everything to avoid conflict. That would make them useful, a species to exploit, to use as a buffer against more dangerous civilizations. Then came the accident. A human transport vessel, officially designated as a civilian cargo hauler called the Persistence, strayed 3 degrees off its authorized flight path and briefly entered Zarkon military space. It was a minor violation, barely worth noting in the complex choreography of interstellar traffic control. Threx decided to make an example. "Fire across their bow," he commanded. "Let them feel Zarkon superiority." His weapons officer hesitated for the briefest moment, an act Threx would normally punish, but complied. A plasma bolt deliberately set to miss streaked across the Persistence's trajectory. The human ship did not panic. It did not flee. It did not transmit apologies. Instead, its engines flared and it accelerated directly toward Threx's flagship. "What are they doing?" Skarn breathed, his scales paling. Before anyone could answer, the Persistence opened fire. What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists across the galaxy for decades. The civilian cargo hauler revealed weapon systems that shouldn't have existed. Compressed energy cannons that tore through Zarkon shields as if they were paper. Kinetic railguns that punched holes through armor plating designed to withstand small asteroid impacts, and worst of all, a fusion missile that detonated so close to Threx's flagship that every alarm in the ship screamed simultaneously. "Return fire." "Destroy them!" Threx roared, his warrior pride overwhelming his tactical sense. His fleet of 17 war cruisers opened up with everything they had. Surely one civilian vessel couldn't stand against the might of the Zarkon military. The Persistence didn't dodge. It didn't run, it killed. One by one, Zarkon ships went dark. The human vessel moved through the fleet like a blade through flesh, its weapons firing with mechanical precision. No wasted shots, no hesitation. Just cold, calculated violence executed with terrifying efficiency. Threx watched in horror as his ships, pride of the Zarkon Empire, each one a masterpiece of military engineering, were systematically dismantled. The Persistence targeted weapons first, engines second, life support third. It wasn't fighting to destroy, it was fighting to disable, to humiliate, to teach. "Sir, they're hailing us," the communications officer reported, his voice shaking. The view screen activated and Sarah Chen's face appeared. She was on the bridge of the Persistence. Behind her, Threx could see that the civilian cargo hauler had a military-grade command center that would make most Council species envious. She was smiling. That same cold smile. "Commander Threx," she said, her voice perfectly calm, "you fired upon a human vessel. Article 7 of the Galactic Conduct Treaty states that any unprovoked aggression against a Council species' civilian craft is grounds for immediate military response. You should have read the fine print before starting this game." "This is an outrage," Threx bellowed. "That ship is a military vessel masquerading as civilian transport. The Council will hear of this." "The Persistence is registered as a cargo hauler," Sarah replied, her smile never wavering. "That it carries self-defense capabilities is simply prudent, given the hostile nature of some galactic species. Now, Commander, you have a choice. You can continue this engagement and I will be forced to destroy every ship in your fleet, or you can stand down, and we can discuss this incident through proper diplomatic channels." Threx's claws gouged furrows in his command chair. 47 minutes. That's how long the engagement had lasted. 47 minutes and his entire fleet was combat ineffective. Systems failing, hulls breached, crews scrambling to prevent catastrophic decompression, and the human ship hung in space, barely scratched weapons still hot waiting. "This isn't over," Threx snarled. Sarah's smile widened just a fraction. "Yes, Commander." "It is." The emergency council session convened 12 hours later. The chamber, usually a place of measured debate and diplomatic courtesy, crackled with tension. Species divided along predictable lines. The military powers outraged at the human aggression. The peaceful civilizations terrified of both sides. and the ancient elder species watching with calculating interest. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the center of the chamber, hands clasped behind her back, that infuriating smile still on her face. Speaker Mordanthus's voice rumbled like thunder. Ambassador Chen, you stand accused of unauthorized military action against a member species. Commander Threx claims you attacked without provocation, using a military vessel disguised as civilian transport. How do you respond? The Persistence is a registered cargo vessel, Sarah said calmly. According to its manifest, it carries industrial equipment, rare earth minerals, and approximately 4,000 tons of coffee beans, which I've learned are highly valued by several council species, and weapons capable of crippling an entire Zarkon fleet. General Crix of the Felgoran pointed out. Self-defense systems, Sarah corrected. When humanity joined the council, we reviewed the statistics. Piracy, illegal raids, and accidental incidents in deep space occur with alarming frequency. Approximately 7% of all civilian vessels are lost to hostile action. We decided that an acceptable number was 0%. So yes, our ships can defend themselves. No civilian vessel should possess such firepower, Threx roared from his section of the chamber, his scales flushed dark with rage. Sarah turned to face him directly, and her smile transformed into something else entirely. Something that made even the elder species lean forward in their seats. Commander, my species has a saying, walk softly and carry a big stick. We're very friendly people. We smile, we laugh, we make jokes, we trade fairly, and we genuinely want peace with all council species. But we evolved on a planet that spent millions of years trying to kill us. We survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcano eruptions, and countless predators that were stronger, faster, and more naturally armed than we were. Do you know how we survived? She didn't wait for an answer. We learned to prepare. We learned to plan. And we learned that the best way to avoid a fight is to make absolutely certain that anyone starting one will regret it. You fired on our ship to make an example, to show that humans were weak. Instead, you discovered that every human vessel, civilian or military, is crewed by a species that refuses to be prey. Ever. The chamber was silent. Threx's mouth worked soundlessly, trying to find words that wouldn't come. Sarah turned back to Speaker Mordanthus. Humanity moves that the Council adopt new protocols regarding ship-to-ship engagement. Clear rules about what constitutes provocation and what constitutes an appropriate response. We propose that these be called the Smile Protocols. Explain, Mordanthus commanded. It's simple. When a human smiles, really smiles, we're happy, friendly, and open to negotiation. But when we smile like this, she demonstrated that cold, thin expression. It means we've already calculated the 17 different ways we can end the threat you pose, and we're politely giving you one chance to reconsider. The smile is a warning, a courtesy, because despite what happened today, we truly prefer peace. Ambassador Zixthar, who had been silent throughout the proceedings, finally spoke. His bioluminescent skin pulsed with patterns that conveyed deep respect and deeper fear. The Smile Protocols. Yes, the name is not appropriate. I second the motion. Over the next 6 hours, the Council debated, argued, and eventually voted. The Smile Protocols were adopted with modifications, clear guidelines about force, proportional response, and the rights of vessels to carry defensive capabilities. Humanity was officially censured for excessive force, but cleared of any serious wrongdoing on the grounds that Threx had fired. First, the Zarkon Empire was fined 3 billion credits and forced to issue a formal apology. As the session adjourned, Threx found himself face-to-face with Sarah Chen in one of the station's corridors. His honor guard and her security detail watched each other warily. Your species is young, Threx said, his voice low and dangerous. Young species make mistakes. Young species overreach. The galaxy is vast and full of dangers you cannot imagine. Sarah met his eyes without flinching. Commander, my species walked out of Africa 200,000 years ago with nothing but sharp sticks and the absolute conviction that we could survive anything. We crossed continents, we sailed oceans in wooden boats, we climbed mountains because they were there. We split the atom and walked on our moon. And now we're here, standing among species that have been spacefaring for millennia, and we're not just surviving, we're thriving. She stepped closer, her small, fragile-looking form somehow radiating threat. You want to know what humans are really capable of? You've seen us smile. You've seen us prepare. But you haven't seen us when we stop smiling. When we decide that peace has failed and survival demands violence, the Zarkon Empire is strong, Commander. But humanity is persistent, and we've learned that strength eventually gets tired. But persistence? She smiled. The cold smile. The warning? Persistence never stops. Threx said nothing as she walked past him, her security team following. He stood in the corridor for long minutes afterward, replaying the engagement in his mind. 47 minutes, one ship against 17. For the first time in his long military career, Threx felt something unfamiliar, not fear exactly, but the cold understanding that he had encountered something that didn't fit into any strategic framework he knew. Later that night, in his private quarters, he pulled up Earth's historical files. He read about World War II, about Vietnam, about Afghanistan, conflicts where superior military forces had been ground down by opponents who simply refused to quit. He read about the Spartans at Thermopylae, about the defense of Castle Itter, about the Australians at Kokoda, and he read about something called the Marathon, an ancient human test where participants ran over 40 kilometers for no reason, except to prove they could. The winning times were faster than most council species could sprint for short distances. In the darkness of his quarters, surrounded by the accolades of a dozen successful campaigns, Commander Threx made a decision. He would recommend to the Zarkon High Command that humanity be given a wide berth, not because they couldn't be defeated, any species could be defeated with sufficient force, but because the cost of defeating a species that never surrendered, never tired, and never forgot would be too high, far too high. Somewhere on Council Station Omega-7, Sarah Chen sat in her quarters composing a message to Earth. First real test completed, she typed. The galaxy now understands the basics. We can proceed to the next phase of integration. She paused, then added a line from an old military quote that few people remembered. In peace, prepare for war. In war, pray for peace, then she deleted it. No need to seem too aggressive. Not yet. After all, humanity had only been in galactic society for 6 months. They had all the time in the world. The Persistence Hunters, 2 standard years had passed since the Zarkon incident, and the galaxy had achieved an uneasy equilibrium. Humanity's representatives sat on 14 major council committees, their influence expanding with disturbing speed. They traded fairly, negotiated honestly, and smiled constantly. But every species now understood the smile protocols, and most had decided that keeping humans happy was far preferable to testing their patience. Ambassador Zixthar, now serving as the official liaison for human affairs, floated in his quarters reviewing diplomatic reports when his communication array exploded with priority alerts. His sensory stalk stiffened with alarm as he parsed the incoming data. The Krell had returned. For species with short memories, the name meant nothing. But the elder races, the Petra Dominion, the Crystalline Collective, the Void Singers, remembered. 50,000 years ago, the Krell swarm had emerged from the galactic rim, consuming everything in their path. They were not conquerors or colonizers. They were devourers, breaking down matter into its component atoms and incorporating it into their ever-expanding biomass. It had taken the combined might of 20 major civilizations and 300 years of warfare to drive them back into the darkness beyond known space. The war had cost trillions of lives and set galactic development back millennia, and now they had returned, stronger and more numerous than before. Zixthar accessed the tactical reports, his bioluminescence flickering through colors of distress. The Krell advance was unstoppable. They had swept through the outer sectors, consuming 12 colony worlds and 17 defense stations. The Felgoran military, widely considered the finest fighting force in the galaxy, had engaged the swarm with everything they had been obliterated in 6 hours. The Zarkon Empire had thrown 3 full fleets at the Krell. They were gone. Even the ancient Petra Dominion had mobilized their planet ships, massive constructs that could crack worlds. The Krell had simply flowed around them like water around rocks and consumed the civilian populations the planet ships had been protecting. The Council was in chaos. Species were evacuating entire sectors. Panic spread like virus through quantum communication channels. And at the center of the maelstrom, one question repeated, what do we do? The emergency council session was the largest gathering in recorded history. Every member species sent their highest representatives. Even civilizations that had previously refused council membership appeared. Desperate for any solution to the Krell nightmare, Speaker Mordanthus, who had weathered 2 million years of galactic politics, looked old for the first time. His stone-like features showed cracks of stress. "We face extinction," he said simply. "The projections are clear. At their current rate of expansion, the Krell swarm will consume the entire galactic arm within 15 standard years. We have tried military force, we have tried evacuation, we have tried negotiation, though the Krell do not communicate in any way we understand. Nothing has worked." Silence fell across the chamber. Species that had warred with each other for millennia looked at each other with shared despair. The Felgoran military advisor, General Crix, spoke what everyone was thinking. "Then we are finished." Not necessarily. Every sensory organ in the chamber turned toward the human delegation. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood, and Zixthar noticed she was smiling. Not the cold smile of warning, the genuine smile of anticipation. "The Krell are a problem," Sarah continued. "A significant problem. But they're not an unsolvable problem. They're just a different kind of challenge than most species are accustomed to facing." Commander Threx, who had maintained careful distance from humanity since their last encounter, leaned forward. "The finest militaries in the galaxy have failed. What can your young species possibly offer?" Sarah's smile widened. "Time, and the willingness to use it." She activated a holographic display showing the Krell advance patterns. "Look at their strategy. They don't hold territory. They consume it and move on. They don't establish supply lines or fortifications. They're a wave, constantly advancing, constantly feeding. Every species has tried to stand against them, to block their path, to fight them like a conventional enemy. What alternative is there?" Mordanthus rumbled. "Don't block them," Sarah said. "Chase them." The chamber erupted in confused protests. Chase the Krell? The concept made no sense. They were the aggressors, the invaders. How could one chase an attacking force? Sarah waited for silence, then continued. "My species has a unique evolutionary history. We weren't the strongest predators on our planet. We weren't the fastest, we didn't have claws or fangs, we couldn't fly or breathe underwater. But we had one advantage that proved decisive against every other species we encountered." She pulled up an image from Earth. Ancient humans running across a savanna, pursuing an antelope. "We never stopped. Our ancestors developed a hunting technique called persistence hunting. We would select prey and chase it. The prey would run and we would follow. It would hide and we would find it. It would fight and we would back off and then continue pursuit. For hours, for days, sometimes for weeks. We didn't need to be faster. We just needed to be more persistent. Eventually, the prey would collapse from exhaustion, its muscles seizing, its will broken, and then we would take it." Zixthar felt his 3 hearts accelerate. He was beginning to understand. "The Krell advance because they encounter resistance and overcome it," Sarah explained. "But what happens if they don't encounter resistance? What happens if instead of standing our ground we pursue them? What happens when they realize they can't stop, can't rest, can't consolidate their gains because we're always behind them? Always following, always there. The logistics alone," General Crix began, "are manageable for humans," Sarah interrupted. "We've already run the numbers. We have 17,000 ships ready to deploy immediately, with rotating crews on a 6-month cycle. We can maintain pursuit indefinitely. The question is, will the Council support this operation?" The debate that followed lasted 14 hours. Species divided along philosophical lines. Some argued it was madness, that humanity was too young to understand the scale of the threat. Others pointed out that every conventional strategy had failed, and perhaps an unconventional approach was their only hope. In the end, desperation won. The Council authorized Operation Endurance with humanity in command. The human fleet deployed 3 days later, and the galaxy watched with a mixture of hope and skepticism. 17,000 ships seemed impressive until compared to the Felgoran fleets that had been destroyed. What could humanity possibly accomplish? Admiral Marcus Washington commanded from the flagship Indomitable, a name that Zixthar found both appropriate and terrifying. The Velkari ambassador had requested permission to observe the operation, partly from diplomatic necessity and partly from morbid curiosity about how humans waged war. The fleet didn't engage the Krell directly. Instead, they positioned themselves just behind the swarm's leading edge, maintaining a distance of approximately 3 light hours. close enough to be detected, far enough to avoid immediate confrontation, and they waited. The Krell, operating on instincts honed over millions of years, did what they had always done. They advanced, consuming resources and multiplying. But this time, when they turned to face the threat behind them, the human ships retreated, maintaining that precise 3-light-hour gap. The Krell advanced again. The humans followed. This pattern repeated for days, then weeks. The galaxy watched with growing confusion. Where was the battle? When would humanity attack? Zixthar began to understand on day 47 of the operation. He was reviewing biological data on the Krell when he noticed something in their behavioral patterns. The swarm was showing signs of stress. Their consumption efficiency was dropping. Their advance speed was decreasing. They were looking over their shoulder. "They're not machines," Admiral Washington explained when Zixthar asked. "They're biological entities evolved from some ancient ecosystem we'll probably never understand. And like all biological entities, they have psychology, instincts, fears." The Admiral pulled up tactical displays showing Krell movements. Watch how they orient. Initially, 100% of their sensory capability faced forward, toward new resources. Now 30% is facing backward, watching us. They're diverting energy and attention from consumption to threat assessment. "But you haven't attacked," Zixthar observed. Washington smiled. The genuine smile, not the warning. "That's the point. We're not a threat they can eliminate. We're not trying to block them or hurt them. We're just there, always there. They can't outrun us because we're faster at sustained speeds. They can't hide because our sensors are more sophisticated. They can't ambush us because we maintain tactical distance. We're the thing in the dark that never goes away." 3 months into the operation, the Krell behavior became increasingly erratic. Their advance slowed to a crawl. They began turning to face the human fleet, abandoning their consumption to prepare for combat. The humans would retreat, and the Krell would eventually turn back to feeding, but now with constant vigilance, constant stress. 6 months in, the Krell stopped advancing entirely. They had reached a resource-rich sector with multiple inhabited worlds ready for consumption, but they didn't attack. Instead, they formed a defensive sphere, all organisms oriented outward, waiting for the humans to strike. The humans didn't strike. They just maintained position, 17,000 ships arranged in a perfect containment formation waiting. 2 weeks later, the Krell swarm began to cannibalize itself. Without new resources and trapped in a perpetual state of high alert, the organisms began consuming each other to maintain energy levels. The sphere contracted. Organisms died by the billions. Still, the humans waited. 1 month after that, the Krell swarm, which had threatened to consume the entire galactic arm, had reduced itself to less than 3% of its original size. The survivors, driven by instincts that demanded they must flee, must escape the persistent predator that never stopped watching, launched themselves into deep space at maximum velocity. The human fleet followed. They chased the Krell for another 4 months, across empty space past the edge of charted territory, into the darkness between spiral arms. And then, when the Krell had been driven so far from any resources that they could never threaten the galaxy again, the human fleet turned around and came home. The victory celebration at Council Station Omega-7 was unprecedented. Species that rarely showed emotion openly wept. Ancient civilizations offered humanity alliances and honors that had never been extended before. The Petra Dominion offered to share technology they had guarded for millions of years. But in a quiet conference room, away from the celebration, a smaller meeting took place. Speaker Mordanthus, General Crix, Ambassador Zixthar, Commander Threx, and a handful of other high-ranking officials sat across from Ambassador Sarah Chen and Admiral Washington. "You didn't save us with superior weapons," Mordanthus said. His voice carried a mixture of gratitude and unease. "You didn't develop some new technology or strategy that we missed. You simply waited. Pursued? Persisted?" "Yes," Sarah agreed. "In 50,000 years of galactic civilization," the ancient being continued, "no species has ever considered such an approach. Do you understand why?" Sarah glanced at Admiral Washington, who nodded for her to continue. "Because most species think in terms of decisive action, overwhelming force, quick resolution. The idea of pursuing an enemy for months without direct engagement seems wasteful. Inefficient." "It is inefficient," General Crix interjected. "The resource expenditure alone, is meaningless if it achieves the goal, Washington finished. You're thinking like military strategists trained in conventional warfare. We're thinking like the persistence hunters we evolved from. Time and resources don't matter if the prey eventually falls. Zixthar's sensory stalks pulsed with understanding. This is what I tried to warn the Council about during first contact. Humans don't fight the way other species fight. You don't measure victory in battles won or territory claimed. You measure it in, what, endurance? Outcomes, Sarah corrected gently. We measure victory in outcomes. If chasing the Krell for 10 months with 17,000 ships achieves our goal of protecting the galaxy, then it's efficient. If it took 10 years, it would still be efficient. If it took a century, you would still do it, Threx finished, his voice barely a whisper. The Zarkon commander looked at the humans with something approaching religious awe. Your species is insane. Beautifully, terrifyingly insane. We prefer determined, Admiral Washington said with a slight smile. Mordanthus stood, his massive form radiating respect. Humanity has been a member of the Galactic Council for 2 years. In that time, you have rewritten our understanding of warfare, diplomacy, and survival. I propose that we create a new position. Humanity shall be designated as the Council's persistence force. When a problem cannot be solved through conventional means, when a threat emerges that our militaries cannot defeat, humanity will address it, not with force, not with technology, but with the absolute certainty that you will pursue the solution until it is achieved. We accept, Sarah said without hesitation. As the meeting adjourned and officials filed out, Zixthar found himself alone with Sarah Chen for a moment. I have a question, he said, and I hope you'll answer honestly. Of course. During the Krell operation, there were 53 occasions when the swarm turned to fight. Each time your fleet retreated. But I saw the weapon readouts. You had sufficient firepower to engage. You could have fought. Why didn't you? Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. Because fighting would have been easier. And humans have learned that the easy path rarely leads to the best outcome. The Krell didn't need to be destroyed, they needed to be broken. Their will, their confidence, their sense of safety. Fighting them would have made them martyrs or victors. Chasing them made them prey. She looked at him with those forward-facing predator eyes and smiled. Genuinely smiled. That's what we are, Ambassador. The galaxy's persistence hunters. And now everyone knows. When humanity starts following you, it doesn't matter how far you run. It doesn't matter how strong you are or how well you hide. Sooner or later, you're going to look behind you and we'll still be there. Smiling. Zixthar thought about this as he returned to his quarters. He thought about the child who had smiled at him during first contact, about the Zarkon incident, about the 10-month chase that had saved civilization, and he updated his official report on humanity with a new conclusion. The first rule of galactic survival has been amended. It is no longer, if a human smiles, run. It is now. If a human smiles, it is already too late. They have decided on their course of action, calculated every variable, and determined they will succeed. The smile is not a threat, it is a promise. They will persist. They will endure. And eventually they will win, not because they are the strongest or the smartest, but because they are the only species in the galaxy that truly understands infinity. To them, time is not a limitation, it's a weapon. And they have learned to wield it with terrifying precision. He filed the report and looked out at the stars, where human ships now patrolled the outer sectors, maintaining watch. Always watching, always ready, never stopping. Somewhere in deep space, far beyond the galactic rim, the remnants of the Krell swarm huddled in the darkness. And in their simple, collective consciousness, a new instinct had formed, a memory that would be passed down through whatever generations they might yet spawn. The persistent ones. The smiling ones. The ones who never stop, run from them, forever, because they will never stop following. Epilogue, 5 years later, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before a group of human children visiting Council Station Omega-7 as part of a cultural exchange program. They gathered around her, their eyes wide with wonder at the alien architecture and the dozens of species moving through the corridors. Ambassador Chen, one child asked, "Why do all the aliens seem scared of us?" Sarah smiled, the genuine smile, warm and kind. "They're not scared, sweetie. They're respectful. There's a difference. But I heard one of them say humans are dangerous. Sarah knelt down to the child's level. Do you know what makes us dangerous? It's not that we're strong or mean. It's that when we care about something, when we really truly care, we don't give up. Ever. We cared about exploring Earth, so we explored every corner of it. We cared about understanding the universe, so we built telescopes and rockets. We cared about protecting our planet, so we learned to work together even when it was hard. And now we care about protecting all these different species, all these worlds. So they're scared because we care? The child asked, confused. They're respectful, Sarah corrected again. Because they know that when humanity makes a promise, we keep it, no matter how long it takes, no matter how difficult it is. That's a powerful thing. Scary to some people, maybe, but also comforting to know you have friends who will never abandon you. The child thought about this, then smiled, that bright, innocent smile of youth. In the corridor, a passing Zarkon diplomat saw the expression and visibly shuddered. Picking up his pace, Sarah noticed and suppressed a laugh. The galaxy was still learning what humanity already knew. A smile wasn't just an expression. It was a declaration, a promise, a warning, and most importantly, a reminder that somewhere in the vast cosmos, there was a species that had looked at infinity and decided it wasn't nearly long enough to stop them from achieving their goals. The first rule of galactic survival remained in effect. When a human smiles, run, or better yet, be grateful they're smiling at you instead of past you. Because if they're looking past you, focused on some distant horizon, pursuing some impossible goal with that characteristic determination, well, then you're just part of the landscape they're crossing on their way to wherever they've decided to go, and nothing, not time, not distance, not physics itself, has ever been able to stop them. The end.